Hello everyone, I'm Sinead from thisimplemama.com, and today we're going to talk about training your little kids so that you can enjoy your homeschool time. I have 5 children. I only homeschool 3 of my 5 children, and I have 2 one toddler and 1 4-year-old who I have trained so that whenever I sit down at my school table and the school books are out, my children know how to behave and how to be respectful and quiet and keep themselves busy during that time so that we can have our hour and a half of sustainable school time that is joyful and peaceful. If you would like to achieve the same thing as well, then keep watching. Hello everyone, it's Sinead from thisimplemama.com, and today we're going to talk about how to train your kids to be quiet and respectful during your homeschool period, and how when you're sitting down and you're teaching elder children, you can have the joyful and sustainable environment for your homeschooling. So let's get into it. If you have young kids like me, then you will quickly realize that homeschooling without any kind of training system in place, without any kind of behavior standard in place for your little ones is going to be very difficult. You can either try and ignore it and hope that you can just get through the few years of having little ones that are underfoot, that are interrupting, that are nagging, they're disrupting your school because they're coming in and want to be at the table but they're too loud and they're too messy and they're taking people's work, all that kind of shebang. Or you can sort of realize, like me, that if I want to create a sustainable and happy and joyful homeschool morning, that I need to train my kids. And considering that I have number 6 on the way, I am going to continue to have babies and toddlers underfoot for the next at least 4 years again. So in this quick video, I'm going to show you how I do it, and we're going to talk about how you can create the same standards and how you can stick to those standards with your homeschool behavior, with your little ones and with your kids at the table to make your homeschooling as sustainable as possible. If you don't know what I'm all about, I'm a minimalist homeschooler. I have a website called thisimplemama.com which talks about motherhood, homeschooling and just family living, and I am big on child training. It is how I'm able to create systems and to stick to systems and to create peace in my home, to create joyful motherhood, which is what my blog is all about. And if you want to achieve this, then you need to have some child training structures in place, which includes discipline. You need to give your kids some kind of structure, and if you're going to set a standard of behavior, whether it's in homeschooling, meal times, leaving the house, chore time, playing together without screaming, you need to have some kind of standard set so that you can achieve a peaceful environment. It does mean that you as a mother have to put in work, effort, and be consistent with it, but it pays off hugely. Now, first things first, what to expect. You know, I would love it if I just didn't have to have any noise, any interruptions at all. That's not going to happen. So yes, my morning still gets interrupted sometimes. I still have to stop and change a nappy or stop and get a drink of water, or they still do want to join in for a little while and colour in and they're a little bit noisier. I allow that. You know, I'm still a mum to those children during the homeschool time. And of course, you're still going to want to try and encourage them and include them, even if they're very young, into your homeschool routine. But you can do this while still setting a standard. So if my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old want to come to the table and they want to colour, that's fine. I get the colouring books and the pencils and they can sit and they can colour. Great scenario. However, they know that they are to stay in their chair. They are to touch the papers and pencils only in front of them and not snatch the children's who are doing school. And that they do get rowdy and they fight and they scream, or they start to sort of get up and get down and just cause too much chaos. They know that they have to leave the room. If I tell them to leave the room, if I put them into their bedroom, if I discipline them, then they know that that time that they had to colour, which was granted to them and they were allowed to join in, if they won't stick to the behaviour standard that I have for my homeschool table, they have to leave. So you can include your children, and you're going to get interrupted, and it's sometimes going to be a little bit messier than usual or a little bit harder to juggle. You're not going to have perfect mornings every day, but you want to stick to that behavior standard at your table, whether they're 2 or 4 or 1.5. If they want to come and join in, they can, but stick to the same behavior standard. So that usually is stay in your chair, keep as quiet as possible, listen to the read aloud or just feel included in the time, but you have to behave a certain way while I'm teaching your older siblings. That's a rule. How I achieve this. Now, I have a child training series which you can join. I will link the email down below. I'll also link the blog post that corresponds to this YouTube video down below as well. And so you can read that and you can join that. If you're interested, if you would like to sign up for that, then I will link it down below. It's going to help you understand how I achieve my standards. But essentially, the first thing you want to do if you want to homeschool and have a good, quiet environment is to set the standard. What do you need from your homeschool environment? Now, last week I did a video on how to avoid homeschool burnout, and this was one of the points that is definitely very important with avoiding homeschool burnout. If you have a chaotic, stressful, noisy, interrupting with nagging children environment every day, then you are not going to want to homeschool, and homeschooling is going to become very overwhelming for you as a mother because it becomes this massive juggling act which you don't have to have it be. And you can sort of feel like you can only have to homeschool when your little one's in bed. I don't like to do that because if the nap time is only in the afternoon, then that is also my quiet time, and I don't want to have to also be homeschooling in that time as well. So I chose to train my kids. So the first thing is set your behavior standard. Set your behavior standard so that you can get what you need from your homeschool time. My behavior standard is quiet and as little moving as possible at the table. It is no fighting. It is no distractions and no distracting others with speech and silly moves and all that kind of stuff. This also goes for my children who are schooling at the table, not just the little ones. The school table has a set standard of behavior for everyone sitting at it. And by that way, when I include the next children who are ready to homeschool, they are already adapted and have learned that behavior, and I don't have to go through it with them as well. To set your standard for little children who are very young, like 1.5, 2, 3, and as soon as they start to move, you can really start to set a behavior standard in them. And that is create a space for them to play safely if you can. Continue with the standard of if they come to you, if they're nagging and crying, or they just want your attention, you can softly and gently teach them, no, I'm not available right now. I can hold you, but you stay quiet. If I give you a pencil and paper, you sit there quietly and you can do those activities. If they do not do that, and if they continue to whinge and whine and nag and they cry and they get louder and they're very disruptive, even if they're not crying, but even if they're just trying to climb up on the chairs and they won't leave the other children alone, then you can put them to bed. Again, reinforce the state that if you cannot take part in this hour and a half of the day, then you cannot be included in this hour and a half of the day. And teach that from a very early age. Placing a little 18-month-old into their cot for half an hour while you teach your kids is not going to kill them, and it will teach them that they have to stick to a certain behavior during that time, even at a very young age. Don't be afraid to separate them, to give them a safe play space, to put them in their cot, and to just stick to that standard. Don't allow them to go from one day behaving really well to one day behaving really badly and thinking, well, they behaved well the day before, so today I'll just put up with it. No, go right back to that same standard, separate them from the group, put them to bed, put them in their room, and don't allow them to be included. This is going to teach them that these behaviors are your set standard, and that is the only standard that goes in your home. The second one is to know how you're going to enforce it. I enforce my discipline through my ways, and I talk about that in my child training series. And so that's how I do it. If you have a way of disciplining your children in your home, know your game plan. Know that when you have a 2-year-old who starts to disobey the rules, who starts to leave that behavior standard, do not let bad behavior overwhelm you at the time when you're maybe already feeling stressed at taking on child training during this time. Instead, come up with a game plan and stick to it, and try and do the same disciplinary action every day unless it's not working, and then you can try something completely different. But if you have a disciplinary action that works and that you use all the time, then stick to it and know exactly when that boundary is crossed. So do not allow your child to throw 6 pencils and then on the 7th pencil put them to bed or discipline them. Discipline at the first pencil. Don't let yourself lose patience. Don't let your children be distracted. Don't let it take 5 minutes of bad behavior before you fix it. Fix the bad behavior immediately. Little children will always work out how far they can push you. If you allow yourself to be pushed for 5 minutes or 10 minutes before you eventually get up and discipline them, then they're going to do it for 5 or 10 minutes. If you do not allow it at all, then eventually they won't try. So you have to sort of pick your battles. The first couple of days might be a bit rough, because especially if it's very new in your home, and especially if you do not train your children in other areas, again, it's going to be quite strange. So you have to sort of understand that this could take several weeks, and you may want to undergo some child training in other areas too, so that your children can have some consistency. Reward good behavior. When school time's over, and if you have had to put a child into the cot or into their bedroom and they've cried and screamed, or they've or they have been behaving well in there, bring them out, include them a hug and say good job, and give them something to work towards. If they're not at all interested in coming to the table, then let them know that they can play with their favorite toys next time, as long as they're not too noisy, as long as they don't disrupt the school table. How to train your kids at the school table. To train your kids at the school table, you want to set a high standard. Don't be afraid to set high standards, even for young children, 5 years old, 6 years old, who are just beginning. And doesn't matter if they're boys or girls, which boys have a tendency to just be more rowdy at the table, to drop their pencil 62 times, to be up and down and distracting each other and looking outside and looking at the fly and all that kind of stuff. So you can set that high standard. It's why I like to try and give my homeschooling overdone. It's another reason why I have chosen minimalist homeschooling and to only do around an hour to an hour and a half a day. This means that my boys just don't get sick of it, that they have a pretty good attention span and retention rate because of that. And so I'm able to get a good effective homeschool done consistently every day, and they're not being overtired by having to sit down for hours every day, even if it's broken up. So because I'm only at the table for an hour to an hour and a half every day, and because I am looking to make my homeschooling as effective and as sustainable as possible for both them and me, then I have high standards. No distractions. They're responsible for their schoolwork. They get it out, they put it away. If they lose it, they get disciplined for that. I have competitions running on who can keep their pencil and rubber the same one all year. And they do that. They get rewarded at the end of the year if they've kept the same pencil and rubber. They get disciplined if they don't put their school away, or if they lose their schoolwork, or if it's put away all haphazardly and we have to take the time to find it and bring it all to the school table the next day. I have high standards. My children need to know that school time is a serious time, that school time is a time when you try hard, and that school time is, it can be engaging and fun, but essentially you don't mess with it. It needs to be a time in the day when there is structure and routine and good behavior in order for it to become consistent every day without being overwhelming for me. So set a high standard. Don't let your children fidget and distract, and discipline the person who keeps distracting the others all the time. And this standard goes as well for how well they draw. How well are they writing their numbers in their maths? If they're not legible and if the standard is dropping, raise your standard again and include that. You don't have to put up with essentially children who will get lazier and lazier if you don't correct and if you don't sit there and go, this is not right. You know my standard. You know I like to be able to read your numbers. You know that your letters have to look and be formed a certain way. Rub it out and do it again. Setting these kinds of standards and these kinds of behavior standards and this kind of work ethic in your homeschooling will pay off immensely, because it just means that overall your homeschool time is smoother and more enjoyable. So to train your kids at the school table, you want to set a high standard, encourage responsibility, and take into account their age and their ability and how long you're sitting down for. So 1, set a high standard. 2, encourage responsibility. Your children should be in charge of getting out, putting away, and keeping in good condition their school books. It is not your job. They should be able to know where they are, to have them without dog ears and ruined spines. They should be able to keep the same pencil and rubber all year long. They should be able to put it away properly and get it out the next morning. They should be able to keep track of their work in a basic standard. It's not up to you to come and organize everything and get out everything and put away everything. If you start that kind of thing they will just take advantage, and that's not really teaching them anything. If you're going to be sitting at the school table, you may as well teach them work ethic and responsibility as well, and that's what I do. Take into account their age and ability and how long you're spending at the school table. If you have a 7-year-old and you're planning on spending 3 hours a day doing home education, then chances are, especially after the first hour, you are going to have a child who is really struggling to sit still, who is really struggling to pay attention, who is struggling not to be distracted, and who you are going to struggle to teach. I think 3 hours is too long until at least they get to high school. So if that's what you're kind of contemplating and you're thinking, well, I'm going to train my kids to sit down for 2.5 to 3 hours every morning, well, you might want to lessen that or break it up or try something new, because I just know from experience that teaching children below the age of 12 that long is too long, and it's just, you're constantly frustrated, and so will your children be in those last few hours when you're trying to just stretch their brains too far. So that brings to an end my homeschool child training video. I hope I showed you enough, and I hope that if you're interested in learning any more details, then you can join my child training email series. It's all for free, and I also have like a written version of this on my blog, which goes through step by step on how I train my kids. For that, that's all. That's what I do. It's very effective. Set your standard. Set a game plan for how you're going to enforce that standard, and don't let the standard drop. And if you do let your standard drop even for a few days, trust me, your kids will just, especially your little ones, they will revert to old behaviors. One of the hardest things with child training is remaining consistent. Consistency, look, it's not always possible. You go through different seasons of life and you're less consistent, but if you are less consistent and if you realize that you've been less consistent, that's definitely the reason why your child's behavior is regressing. It always will. You have to be right on top of it all the time. So I'm Sinead from thesimplemama.com. I have other videos on minimalist homeschooling, my minimalist curriculum, homeschool burnout, life skills in homeschooling. If you're interested in any of them, then subscribe. And if this video helped you at all, please like it so that it can get to other homeschool mothers who might benefit from this video. So until next time, bye.